Hey, what is happening, people? Woodsy Workout here. Today I'm talking about Hyrox simulations, when to do them, how often to do them, and other things to consider. Now I'm going to break this topic up into two videos. This one will be on why we run race simulations, and in the next video I will be doing it on like how to run one and things to consider like equipment and treadmills and so on. So before we dig into the nuances of how to recreate the race, first we want to consider why we are doing the simulation. And there are two main reasons for this. The first is either to get a feel of how the whole thing will be like put together. You want to get a similar stimulus to what the race is. And if this is the case, then small details like the number of turns and transitions and things like that won't matter so much. You just want to be able to get a good, honest feel of do a solid effort, and that better prepare you for the race. And then the other reason you would run a simulation is to use it as a time trial for the race. So to see where your fitness is and to test your execution of it. And if this is the case, then the small details do matter. Yes, you want it to be as similar to the Hyrox race as possible, but because it's never going to be exact, it's more important that it is standardized and repeatable than it is really close to the race. So basically, will you be able to repeat the same simulation under the same conditions? And the reason for this is you can't learn if you change too many variables. And likewise, a big mistake that I see a lot of people make in the gym is running their simulation in the gym and thinking that it will equate to the same finish time on race day. And you know, it's hard enough for Hyrox to get the courses to be the same. You're not going to do it in the gym. So don't think that if you got this time in the gym, it's going to mean this on race day. And I hate to break it to you, it's often slower. But you need to compare your simulations to your simulations and your races to your races. So only once you've got like a considerable amount of data on both can you be like, well, in the gym, I normally run 3 minutes quicker and it feels easier, and you can make those comparisons. So when and how often should you run simulations? Well, this question really comes down to your goals and your experience. If it's your first time racing and your goal is just to complete the race, if you've never done anything like this kind of volume before, then there's no need to do the full workout before race day. You could try like what I call like half rocks, which is just like 50% of the stations and 500-meter runs in between, and kind of build from there. You could go from a quarter to a half, 75%, and that could be enough before your race. If you're a little more experienced and you want to start throwing down faster times, maybe you've done one before and you kind of have an idea of where you want to improve, then I suggest doing it in chunks. So like you do the full workload, but you might only do the first quarter or the first half in one session, and then you do the second half in another session. And the reason for this is it's really the last few reps of the station that become the real challenge. If you think of like a sled push, then if you only ever do 2 lengths and move on, you don't really know how those last 2 feel. And let me tell you, the last 2 are the hard ones. So that's the reason I would say like you can't just run half a simulation, like 500-meter runs and stations, and then try to double it and just think that that's going to be your time. it accumulates, and so does the fatigue. So that's going to slow you down. So I recommend, if you are an experienced athlete, then you can do something like this, 3 to 6 stations with the full runs in there in that order, once or twice a week from about 8 weeks out. And I like to do the full workout, the full 8 and the full runs, about 2 to 3 weeks out. Now, again, this is individual, and I think it's important to build to this point and monitor your recovery, how you feel the following few days. You don't want this to wipe you out. You want to be able to train again within the week. So that kind of brings me on to my next question, which is, can you do too much Hyrox simulation training? And the answer is yes. I do believe that you can limit yourself by just repeating the Hyrox workouts over and over. I think that just like any sport, you can benefit from specific targeted work like traditional strength training or running. And if you program them correctly, then you can train harder and more frequently by breaking up the components. And then gradually increasing the amount of Hyrox specific workouts in the build up to a race. So about 8 weeks out, you can start to do the more specific stuff and practice your execution, how it feels, timings, etc. If you are more interested in this, I do have a training principles guide on my website that kind of explains it, and I did go over it in my last video, so go and check that out. And finally, I want to discuss the best use of race simulations or Hyrox specific, and that really is that they don't count. So try things. This is your opportunity to experiment, see what works for you. I mean, I share a lot of content on and tips on this YouTube channel and my Instagram on stuff that has worked for me and the clients that I coach. But as long as you follow the race rules, there's no set way of doing anything. So the best way is the one that works for you. Some things to try out include how you're going to break things up. When are you going to pause on the sleds, for example? Is it every half length, every 10 steps? How are you going to break up the wall balls? And actually, on that note, I heard a very interesting discussion on the Rock Zone pod, so shout out those boys. And I believe it was Ed that was discussing the wall balls, and he breaks up the wall balls with a set of 16 and then drops by one rep each time. So it'll be like a set of 16 first, then 15, then 14, down to 9. And that works out to be the total of 100. So I've never actually thought about doing it this way. And that's something that I'm going to try out in my next race simulation or Hyrox workout. And then pacing. Pacing is something that I always talk about, but it's because it is so relevant, and it does change depending on your fitness, your current fitness, and how your race is going at the time. So try things like running faster, going easier on the stations, try going harder on the stations, easier on the runs. And like with the skier and the rower, try different paces and make a mental note of like what they feel like. I know that, for example, I row at like a 150 to 155 pace in the race, and that's quite comfortable. So I know if I get to the rower and it's a real challenge to hold that pace, then I've probably come out too fast, and vice versa. If that's feeling nice and smooth, then I can probably start to step it up from there. And then lastly, think about the variables outside of the race. So try running through your simulation at a similar time of day as your race, and plan like what you're going to eat, what you're going to wear, your hydration. Are you going to take gels? When are you going to take those? These are all things that can impact your race, and you're never going to, you only get to race a handful of times. So you want to kind of go into it feeling prepared. And although it might not be exactly the same, when things do crop up, they are familiar to you. So I think that is going to give you the best results and the best possible run on race day. In the next video, I will be going over the details of simulating a race in the gym. So things like best equipment and ways to mimic it if you don't have the equipment. So I'll be getting into all of that in the next video. If you've got any questions regarding this one, drop a comment. And if you are interested in that ebook that I talked about, the training principles, you can find that on my website with plenty more resources. That's coactiveperformance.com. And you can reach out to me on Instagram at WoodsyWorkout, where you can find plenty more tips and tricks on all things health and fitness. Until then, I will see you in the next video.